Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. This is the very first episode of the Lions Out of Water podcast. I'm Nathan Blank.
I'm Caden Parisian, and we have a lot of topics to discuss today. More so about Lake Winnipeg and our personal preferences, techniques, what lines to use, rods to use, because, a lot of people like to fish Lake Winnipeg and sometimes they're just clueless on what they can use, so.
I mean, I've grown up on the lake.
Same.
I know you have. Completely different sides. Obviously, Lake Winnipeg is the largest lake in Manitoba, 6th largest lake in Canada, freshwater-wise. It's divided from the North Basin and the South Basin. The South Basin is where I'm on the east side. So the east side being your Balsam Bay, your Grand Marais, Grand Beach, like that area. Sunset, that's just kind of the area that I've always fished for walleyes. And you've been on the complete polar opposite side.
Yeah, I've on the west side, and usually I'm located out of Winnipeg Beach area. There's also Gimli area, Matlock area as well. Probably a well-known location is the mouth of the Red River. Lots of guys launch at Matlock, and they can drive their trucks all the way to the mouth, depending on the year. Probably one of the most hot spots on the lake right now is the mouth, because you have a chance of catching like a 35-inch walleye in that area. So that's kind of where I've grown up fishing is Winnipeg Beach and driving our snowmobiles down to the mouth and fishing that area too. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, me personally, since it gets so deep, so fast on my side, very start of the season, depends on what ice is safe to walk on. You want about 3 inches. Lake Winnipeg, I want like 4 or 5 maybe. It's a lot more dangerous out there. I've definitely done it on some really sketchy 2 inches of ice, but that's just me. But it's really nice on my side. Like I said, it gets deep really fast. Lake Winnipeg is absolutely featureless. A depth change of about like a foot from the norm is considered big characteristic change for bottom contour. So definitely a whole different ball game, Lake Winnipeg, compared to all the other lakes. It is a eutrophic lake, so it is muddy bottom and shallow, featureless. Big mud bowl. So a few different things that we want to talk about. We want to talk about rods. We want to talk about lure selection. We want to talk about location. Now, I'm going to start off with location.
That's a good one.
Because that's the biggest that's the hot topic that everyone talks about. Location. Now, first ice, let's say it's January 1st. Where on your side, or what depth do you want to be at, ideally?
Probably like a hot depth for most people anyways, and my personal preference would probably be 12 feet. That's probably like right on the money. 12 feet of water below the ice, considering how much ice you have, anywhere from 5 inches to a foot of ice. 12 feet below the ice is usually a good targetable depth for walleyes, but as the season progresses, you can move out deeper to the 14, 15 feet of water where you can find those highways of fish flowing by. But yeah, I'd probably say first ice, about a foot of ice, maybe 6 inches of ice out there. I'd probably try 12 feet-ish, maybe 9 or 10, somewhere around there.
So yeah, I'd say personally, it also depends start of the day. Generally, the rule goes early in the morning, you're shallower. As the day progresses, they go deeper, and the same thing happens as the evening comes along. They come right back shallow for feeding. Like you said, I personally like the 12 all times of the year. So within about like 2 feet of that, so whether it be about up to 14 feet or like 10 feet, a lot of people fish really shallow for walleyes out here. I've personally never done good in shallow, on my side at least, to make that clear. I've tried like 4, I've tried 6, I've tried 5. I've tried a little bit of 3. It's just with the ridges on my side especially, it's usually hard to get to 3. You don't know when you're going to hit bottom or where or the depth is or how deep it is. But yeah, generally between about 8 to 12, 13-ish is usually what I go for. And I find the biggest thing with Lake Winnipeg, obviously, is their roaming. What are you laughing at? Did I say Lake Winnipeg?
You said Lake Winnipeg.
Lake Winnipeg.
Oh, there you go.
They're going to be roaming. There's no structure to stick to, so they're going to be following bait fish. I've seen it on live imaging, there's huge schools of bait fish constantly moving around. So these walleyes are just in the general area of where they are. So when they are hungry, you just pop into a school. But that's the thing. 12 feet-ish is roughly what you want to be in. But at the end of the day, you have to be experimenting experimenting
There you go.
with everything.
Yeah.
You got to be moving around lots. Generally, I would say, especially if I'm hole hopping, if it's a nice day, when I say nice day, like warmer than like -20, but moving every 10 to 15 minutes, maybe. If you're not getting, I mean, I know some people that will literally spend like 45 seconds on a hole. If they're not marking anything, they're on to the next hole. The next hole might not be very far from that hole, but generally, if I'm fishing a certain hole for 5-10 minutes, I want to move to a new hole at least like 10, maybe 15 yards away.
And that's another thing I was gonna, add on to is when you're fishing a spot. Obviously, you can, set it on a spot at 12 feet, 14 feet, 15 feet, wherever you want to be. And it's a nice day outside, like you said, -20, -15 is a good day with no wind, obviously, because on Lake Winnipeg it is like a snow desert out there, and it can turn real fast, and it can get very ugly very fast. You got a good day out there. And what I would say is if you're experienced, drill 10 holes, maybe 15 holes in that area, and, like couple, 10 yards this way, 10 yards that way, 10 yards the other way, and just hole hop, just go from this hole, try this hole for 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, go to the next one. Because, these fish can just be also sitting and just waiting for something to pop by, and, you could be that 10 yards away and that fish not even see you because of the murky water in Lake Winnipeg, which is you can't see, in front of your nose for most of these fish anyways. So yeah, drilling 10 yards away, fishing, almost every hole in that spot, and if nothing, that's, when you have to get out of there and try a different location. And then when you get to that location, do the same thing, 10 yards this way, 10 yards that way, 10 yards that way, keep drilling holes and, trying to find the fish.
Yeah, that's exactly the piece of this, being in the right place at the right time. But I actually want to add on to something you were saying about the water clarity. Now, if you've been to Lake Winnipeg and you look down the hole, you can't. Let's be honest. It's so murky.
Especially like early season too. As soon as the ice forms, it is just murky. Maybe the end of the season is a little clear, like maybe March. It's a little clear, not much, but yeah, especially first season, it's awful.
But I don't know about you, but I've noticed in the last like 3-4 years, the zebra mussels, which have become very, there's an abundance of them now, which is unfortunate. But I find since then, I don't know if there's another factor or environmental reason, but like the water's getting clear.
Yeah,
I can see farther down.
Absolutely.
I don't know what I think it's because of zebra mussels. Because what they'll do is, well, specifically when they die, is they'll take in oxygen, release CO2, but it's not good for fish, obviously, because it can create dead zones. But I find it's actually making the water more clear. I don't know exactly how the science works with that, but that's just one thing I find. I just wanted to add that on there.
Absolutely.
Depth change, like I said, very limitless on Lake Winnipeg. It'll get deep fast on my side anyway, but then it'll stay gradually the same. It'll get to, I mean, it could get like to what, 90, 100 feet in the deepest spot, like more towards.
100?
No, 90 to 100.
90 to 100.
90 to 100 feet.
Oh, 90 to 100
feet.
Oh,
deep.
yeah. Okay.
Or like
I thought you said 9,200 feet. Okay, never mind. Yeah, probably deepest spot in the lake could probably be 80 to 100 feet, like you said. But that's in North Basin by Hecla area. But yeah, for the most part, South Basin is a mud bowl. And like we said, for depth change, you could drive your snowmobile or your quad or your truck an hour that way and find the same depth, maybe a foot change. Like, it is ridiculous. So it's really just trying to find highways of fish, because when sometimes they'll school up and they'll stick to one contour line. And if you get on that contour line, you could just have a heyday of fish of, 200, 100 fish days and multiple masters and have yourself a heyday.
You see that ball small time, people will pull like 5 masters, 10 masters a day. But yeah, I mean, that's the golden ticket. I mean, obviously is moving around a lot. But with that is where the importance of your equipment and the gear that you have comes into play. Now, obviously, money does play a huge part in that, how much you're willing to invest in it. It is an investment at the end of the day, certain things. Your snowmobile, your rod, your auger, it's an investment. Making sure they're always in condition. They're what you want for your style. It depends different people. Some people want to be hole hopping around on a sled. Some people prefer to walk. It depends the time of the year and the weather and certain conditions. Personally, I mean, I can get quads out there. The snow doesn't get super bad. I mean, the one thing I'm worried about the most is actually the ridges, about how they can get pretty sharp. I don't want to pop a tire out there, that would not be good. But
And even in the snowstorms too, they can blow wind on top of the ridges. You're driving your quad, and you can just sink right in the ridge, and you don't even see it because it's just snow blown over. And then, half the time you go out by yourself, and I'd hate to try and get a 400, 500 pound quad out of a ridge by yourself. That doesn't sound like fun at all.
I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. Driving on a truck, you hear a lot of people get stuck with trucks. Whereas when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it's awful. Walking, it's nice to get a good exercise, but you're limited to what you can do. You can't go out so far. So I would say the biggest thing is just having your equipment relevant to your style of fishing. So if you do a lot of hole hopping and you're constantly on the move, maybe you're going to want a sled or a quad. You're going to want, for example, going into rods, you're going to want a longer rod. If you're doing a lot of hole hopping, you're outside, you're not using the tent, I find a longer rod. I have the two Frostbite 50-inch Run and Good medium ice rods. They both have a 1,000 size reel on them. But I find, because I like to be outside a lot, it's a lot nicer to be a little bit farther back from the hole. I can still see my screen, but I'm able to pin fish, I find, a lot better with a longer rod.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of mid-class. I have a 39 medium digger and a 39 medium light drench, and the medium light's kind of good for a dead stick rod because you can really see that tip load up before the fish even feels it, and the medium is also just to haul those fish up the hole. But like you said, like the longer rod, you can have more of that rod to load up on the fish to keep those hooks pinned, especially when it's middle of February and it's minus 40 and those fish's jaws are just rock solid. You really got to bury those hooks home and steer them up the hole that's 4 feet down, because we get 4 feet of ice sometimes on Lake Winnipeg, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I've heard of guys fishing in a shack with 28-inch rods, 26-inch rods. I mean, those do the trick too. It's just sometimes when you're fighting the fish and these big fish are shaking their heads trying to get it loose, that rod really likes to spring up really fast because of how short of a length it is. So it honestly gives the fish a better chance to throw that hook. Whether if you have a big rod like a 50-inch run and gun, I honestly think it's overdue, but you do you. Yeah. But having a longer rod can honestly load up the fish, and it doesn't spring back as much as a shorter rod would, so you can keep those fish pinned.
And obviously, if you have a smaller tent, like a 1-man, 2-man, 3-man, like you can't get a very big rod there.
Yeah.
But if you have a bigger tent and you do a little hole, there's really no sense in having a short rod. I find the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. I mean, storage and finding a case is one problem, but once you kind of get past that.
You don't even have a case for your rod.
I don't have a case for my
one.
Get the old pail, that's all you do. There's all kinds of pails out there. But yeah, selection of that. For a reel, I mean, 1,000 size, I'm not as so much worried about the weight of the reel. I could really care less, personally. I just care about the line capacity. A 500 would do just fine. I just like having the comfort in having 1,000 size reel with however many yards of lines. Probably, I mean, with braid, you can get well over 100 yards, well over 300 feet of line on there. So even though it's not a deep lake, if you're constantly cutting and retying, I just have a snap personally, but the sky's the limit with the amount of line you have with a 1,000 size reel.
And like you said, yeah, you don't really need a 2,000, 3,000 size reel for ice fishing, unless that's your personal preference and you're comfortable with that. Go right ahead, and no one's stopping you. But you don't need much line. Like we said, Lake Winnipeg, the deepest I've fished on there is 20 feet, and I really can't find any deeper. So there's really no need to have that big spool for, a big amount of line. You're not trolling, right? So 500 or 1,000 size is a good all around size for a reel if you want to tackle that.
Yeah, and line. There's the 3 different types of line: monofilament, fluorocarbon, braid. There's like the Pro Tech Power Pro. Power Pro is like the best braid. All around, yeah. It's the most expensive. Arguably, can you get the same kind of line off of AliExpress for $5 per 3,000 yards of line? Maybe. But Power Pro, I've always had it on my reels. I've tried Berkeley X5. I've tried Spiderwire Stealth. I've tried Durabraid. I've tried a few. I've Suffix A32. I've tried that. Power Pro is the best, in my opinion. But I find braid to be the best because, for one, there's no stretch, so it's a lot more sensitive. Generally, if you're fishing like really deep water, if you're like fishing the Lakers, you definitely want braid, but I just still like it for walleyes, having the braid. And the fluoro leader, some people don't really understand. Tying straight to braid never really works. It'll slip. It can work. With a fluoro leader, fluoro is like invisible underwater. So generally, the rule of thumb is if you're more of a clear lake, you're going to want more fluoro. So there's more distance away from your main line of your braid that the fish can see. It's easier to see braid underwater. Whereas with Lake Winnipeg, though, you can't see very far down. You wouldn't need as much fluoro leader. But that's just something to take into consideration.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard people tying straight the braid too, because with these fish, like I said, their jaws are, rock solid, and they really want to drive those hooks home. So tying straight the braid really gets that hook right into them. But I mean, half the time it'd be better to see, these fish not see your bait than having to drive those hooks home, because I mean, if you do have a longer rod, keep them loaded up, it kind of cancels out the odds there. So
I could argue too, though, with fluoro, it's easier for hook sets in some cases, because if they don't have it fully in their mouth, it'll take a little bit of a load. It has a bit of stretch in it. Not as much as mono. Mono will like infinitely stretch until it's gone. Fluoro has a bit of stretch in it. Whereas with braid, you could be pulling the hooks out of the fish's mouth left, right, and center. If it's not, if it's more of a finicky bite, a little more negative. That's just one thing to keep in mind too. Jigs.
Baits.
Yep. If you think of walleyes, for the most part, you're thinking of like sitting on a pail on Lake Winnipeg with your rod, jigging a minnow. Jigging a minnow is one of the most fundamental presentations in the sport of fishing, and it is still to this day so effective, arguably the best presentation to use.
If you don't have that tied on your line, you're doing something wrong.
At least one rod. At least one.
You're doing something wrong if you don't have that.
And one of the big things, I've seen this, is people don't understand the importance of how fresh their frozen minnows are. I know that's kind of weird. They're already dead. What does it matter? But when you're thawing and pre-freezing minnows over time, I mean, they are going to deteriorate and get more mushy, but it's going to have a little bit of a different scent to it and more of a stench. And fish definitely can sense that. Walleyes are more keen on their eyesight and their scent. I mean, as most fish, so it's not like they're not considering that when they're looking at something dangle above them. So that's one of the things that I've always seen. And live minnows will beat frozen minnows 9 times out of 10. If you can get them, now it's harder because by 2030, the government wants them gone, basically, about all the dealers. But I think that's super important and not a lot of people know about, and they should definitely pay more attention to.
I don't know how many times we've been, actively jigging or, ripping rattle baits or whatever the case may be, and 9 times out of 10, the rod that goes down is our dead stick with a live minnow. Like, I don't know how many times we've counted those. It's ridiculous. Because, you can have that, they come in, they see that live, they see that rattle bait, that 4-inch rattle bait or whatever you're using, 60 millimeter, 70 millimeter, whatever it is, and they see that, they're interested, whatever, but they just won't bite, and then they go 5 feet this way and they see something just suffering there in that live minnow, and it's just such an easy presentation for them, and half the time we just leave it dead sticked, see the tip go down, and it's game on.
You could spend all this money getting crazy rattle baits that are catching fishermen more than catching fish. It's always jigging a minnow that usually gets the job done. That's my confidence bait. If I could use one lure on Lake Winnipeg the rest of my life for presentation, it'd probably be a jigging a minnow. Yeah. Super realistically. But that doesn't mean that there's a time and a place for other different presentations. For example, a rattle bait.
Yeah. I feel with rattle baits, you can't really go too big on them. I feel like you personally, you've used smaller rattle baits in the past, like 2-inch rattle baits, and I mean last winter I had no faith in them, and he outfished me probably 9 times out of 10, and that actually gave me confidence boosts to go and buy some, and I obviously got on some fish too. But in past years, I've kind of experimented with 100 millimeter tantrums, 4-inch rattle baits, and I've done just as well. So you really can't go too big because these fish are hungry, aggressive, especially in the early season too, and in the late season. First ice and late ice, probably really keen time to tie on big baits and experiment. And it's such a feeling when such a confidence booster when you can catch a big fish on a big bait and, look at it and go, oh my God, it's bigger than my hand. And you can catch, yourself a trophy walleye.
Same time too, you do have to be realistic with weight classes too. Cause obviously the bigger fish are going to be more prone to take something that's larger just to fill them up easier. Why get a 10 little small amounts something when you can get just one just big one, be good. But there are lots of dinky sized walls in like Winnipeg. You do get the aggressive, like 12-inch shogger every now and then of walleye. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, like size selection is very important. And I find during the mid season when there's a little lull, where they're extra negative and they're super picky, they're not really taking much. Downsizing to very small presentations. I've used my 36 St. Croix, like the Scandic Light, using little tungsten that I would use for crappie, and it's what the walleye are biting on now. When I see other people who are still trying to use the same old tactics, like you were saying, maybe doing bigger rattle baits, and it's just not working the same. So you definitely have to be adapting to what the fish are biting on. You can't just be stuck in your old ways. Don't fall in love with the deer stand when the deer have gone that way.
Exactly.
That's my thinking behind it.
What else?
I have a question for you.
What's that? Uh-oh.
Don't.
All right.
You sounded way too excited for that. No. Tackle organization. I just, we are completely opposite. I am more so, I stress the importance of not having as much tackle. The tackle that you do have that you're constantly using and it's stored properly. And you are focused on having every lure possible, but you have some with tag ends still tied on it. They're maybe a little dirty, don't have the red hooks on them. I just want to ask, why?
I get lazy. I can probably vouch that for many anglers, especially after a long weekend of fishing. I don't see any laws in having tag ends on lures. I don't feel like fish would see it as much as if I had braid tag ends. Those are usually gone. But fluoro tag ends, I don't see any difference. But half a part of me is just being lazy. I'll probably say that.
The reason I asked that is this is where I want to get to the next topic. Tackle, organization, how you store everything. Now, my whole life, I'd used your simple Plano tackle box where it's clear, it's divided into however many compartments within the box, and you have, your different colored jigs, how I used to do it. But when you're on Lake Winnipeg especially, and you're taking, even this goes for any lake too, but more so with the ridges. If you're taking a sled ride 20 minutes out, and you're going over all kinds of ridges, you want to make sure your tackle is safe. And I find if you're spending money on jigs, maybe you're getting more Northland like MVP jigs or Google Eye jigs by Acme or Pendu jigs, whatever, you want to store them more properly. And I find that when I switch to the box that specifically, it's like foam. I'll leave a link in the bio after this to go check it out. But it's actually stuck in the box. And if you shake the box, there's no give to it. Now, you've seen this before, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I just think that when you're taking care of your gear like that, especially when you're more prone to use a sled, that you want to make sure all your stuff is secure properly. And that doesn't go for lures too. I'm talking about rods. I'm talking about your tent and your heater and all that sort of stuff. You personally have, I don't even remember what sleds you have.
What do you mean?
Toboggans.
Oh, toboggans. I got a Freybill flip over and a Pelican sled that carries.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've gone to the mouth and I've put my tackle box in my toboggan behind me, and like Nathan said, the ridge is from Winnipeg Beach to the mouth is probably a half an hour snowmobile ride. It's a good ride, and you're going 10 kilometers an hour, going over ridges and tire tracks and stuff like that. And I don't know how many times I've come back and I'm emptying my jig cases of the paint chippings off of my jigs. Half the time though, it is the bulk jigs that like to go first, usually the aftermarket ones or whatever, like the Google Eye jigs and stuff like that. They don't tend to chip as much, but the bulk jigs for sure, they chip very easily. And I don't know how many times I've emptied my box just because of that. Rattle baits, I haven't really had a problem with them being broken or anything. I may have to replace a couple of hooks, but that's no big deal. Google Eye jigs, the glass tends to break in them a lot. That sucks because then you lose the rattle and the purpose in it, and then it just acts as a bulk jig. But having the importance of that box that you were saying is absolutely amazing. I've added that to my Christmas list already, so Santa knows.
So I gotta ask again,
Um,
if you were to, knowing you're going on a little bit of a trek, what would you do to your sled that would make sure that there's little to no damage done to the items in the sled? What would you personally do?
That's a good question.
Because see, personally, I would put in just things of foam. You get sheets of foam, like whether it be almost even old blankets and just stuff like that. Something like a cushion almost. Like you've seen, there's the yellow kinds. I'm sure everyone's seen them before. But foam and just making sure there's really no give in anything. Like you want to make sure it's nicely packed tight and everything is where it wants to be. Like heavy or like heavier stuff on the bottom, obviously.
Yeah.
Loose items in more crevices. Start with the big stuff and then add in the small stuff. But I think that's very important too, is actually getting your stuff out there, because if you don't pack it right and it's broken on you, or you don't know what you have, or you didn't go over it, and you get out there and you realize you don't have your heater or something like that, organization and just taking care of everything you have, I think is super important.
Absolutely. And for like my setup in my sled, the Pelican sled, probably the Costco special that you probably see me if you go into Costco. But it has 2 latches on the bottom, and for my auger, I put a foam thing at the head. It's an electric 40 volt, so it wouldn't bang around in the sled. So I tie down ratchet straps to the sled like really tight, so my auger goes with my sled, and it doesn't rattle around, doesn't rattle against anything else. It's secure. It's not moving anywhere. And then for the most part, the rest of the stuff in my toboggan is tight, like my rod case and stuff like that. But I did break my rod case last year because of an accident I had in a sled. My toboggan literally tipped over because I think it was like March 21st or like 20th or whatever, and there was no snow on the ground. And I went over railroad tracks and whole thing flipped and big hole in it, and yeah.
But imagine what would have happened to the rods if they were just loosely put in there.
Exactly. That's another thing too. Not chipping out on your rod storage. Like I know lots of people have soft cases and everything, and those can get wrecked super easily. And the worst thing probably that happens is when you get your rattle baits and jigs stuck in the case, and then there's holes in them, and you get snow in them, and yeah, that sucks. But for the most part, those soft cases you can throw over your shoulder. But I mean, how many stuff do you have on your back? A backpack full of stuff, and your snowmobile helmet or your quad helmet, and then your rods again, right? So yeah, haven't cheaped out on the rod case for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, the analogy I always make is, would you put your Silverado that you so dearly love outside in the cold all winter? I mean, obviously you want to take care of it. If you have something that's very important, you want to make sure it's always in working condition and it's taken care of the way it should be. And I mean, with my auger batteries, with camera batteries, with tackle box, like the important things I find are not so much the amount of lures that you have, but how you take care of the lures you do have. You could have all the lures in the world, but if you don't take care of it properly, it's falling out the sled, it's chipping and all that, it doesn't matter.
So. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like too, for the most part, like people don't even think about this because, half the time, if you go to Matlock, it is a city of trucks and shacks. So lots of people like to go out in their trucks, and for the most part, the only thing that they're wrecking is their trucks, not their toboggans. So I know a lot of people don't think about that way, but I mean, it still does bounce around in the back of the truck. But more so for snowmobiles and for quads, and yeah, you want to take care of your gear in your sled.
It's also how much you want to spend, like I was going over before with budget, but where do you want that money to go towards? Do you want to put all that money in an auger or a shack or just your run and gun stuff? Like, it's up to you. It's completely subjective what you want to do with your money, how you want to spend it. Personally, I spent a lot of the money on the auger and the tent. And I think that is one of the most important things. So I have just an insulated, I believe it's 12 by 6? You've seen
it's
it.
A 6-man tent, yeah.
6-man, generally, if it's a 6-man, it's probably more like a 3, maybe 4-man, usually how it goes. Insulated, very important for Lake Winnipeg. It's going to save you money in propane or diesel heat, whatever. Well, I mean, I got the new diesel heater. That's another thing that I'm excited to use. Hopefully get that camping. Real Life with Mike was doing a video on that, like the new diesel heater, so that'd be interesting. I'll miss the smell of propane, but that's just a side note. And an electric auger, so having the Ion G2, so it goes, the Ion X was the first introduced, it goes the Ion R1, the Ion G2, and then of course the new Ion. Apologies, cutting the video. We're gonna get right back to it. As I was saying, with the why are you smiling? Why are you smiling?
It's not.
Just for a little bit of background context, the smell just, I don't know where that came from personally, but as I was saying, with augers, what was I talking about augers?
I think you were. You were talking about augers and tents.
Last augers. And like I said, the Ion X, Ion R1, Ion G2, Ion Alpha, they just came out last year, so the electric augers have definitely gone better. The Ion X was not very good. The new Ion Alpha, I have held it, I've spun it, I haven't actually drilled a hole in it, but they're absolutely beautiful. And like I was saying before, what you want to put your money towards if you want to spend $250, $300 and get like an old Eskimo Z51 Stingray or Shark or a 31cc Stingray Eskimo, you can. Or if you want to spend upwards of $1,000 and get a really nice electric auger. And the new E40s just came out by Eskimo. I don't know if you saw that, but apparently they're even lighter than the other competitors. So
how heavy are they? I think like 13.
People were saying it felt like 8 pounds in the hell, but I think it's technically 14.
I think it was 13 or 14.
It depends what flight you get, 10-inch or 8-inch. There's going to be a little bit of a difference, but apparently it's super light. It looks like an Alpha between the two. Like, all the augers now have more of a square shaped, whereas with my G2, it has more of like a bracket shape. You know what I'm talking about? I personally love the G2 anyways. The 10-inch is what I have. You have the 10-inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and night and day. The polymer flight, which is plastic flight, people seem to think that it is going to be a lot worse because it's going to break, be more prone to break. And while that might be true, I mean, you could probably break a polymer flight easier than a steel flight. But one of the big things I like is not only is it lighter, but if there is a buildup of ice on your flight, it is flimsy, has a little bit of give to it. So if you're giving a little bit of give like that, it could just fall right off. And you can't do that with steels. You got to be chipping it away because ice can affect how the hole is drilled. So that's one thing to keep in mind too.
Yeah. I don't have much to add on that. You're pretty spot on.
I mean, you have
I have the Strike Master 40 volt steel flight. I bought it when it like almost first came out. And, you know, we thought it was great, lightweight and everything, and then Ion came out with that G2, and then one-upped it, and then the Alpha, and then, you know, Eskimo came out with one, and now I'm stuck in old class now, so I don't have a composite flight like yours, but, you know, Strike Master did come out with the 24 volt, which is absolutely sweet. I've held that, spun it too, but, you know, I also think too, for Lake Winnipeg, you do want a 40 volts, like a higher end auger to drill more holes. With a 24 volt, I mean, if you're going to go crappie fishing, first ice, perch fishing, first ice, go right ahead. But yeah, and then Strike Master did come out with a 40 volts Pro Light with a 10-inch composite flight as well. But I just haven't upgraded. I'm not in that class yet, but soon to be, hopefully.
And I have to thank too Strike Master. They've had that auger out for what, 3 seasons now? Maybe even 4, like a while. Whereas with Eskimo, they just came out for the brand new like 2023, 2024 season. The Alpha came out for the 2022, 2023 season. So if Strike Master doesn't come out with something, I don't know what they're gonna do. How they're
they came out with the 24, 22, 23, right?
They came out with the 24 volt, which is basically a mini 40 volt.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're gonna do if they're gonna do a new auger because that's basically.
Well, yeah, they came out with the 24 volts and the 22, 23. Then they came out with, 21, 22 was a 24.
Yeah.
And then they came out with the Pro Lights and the 22, 23.
Yeah,
so they came out with a composite flight.
They changed the flights, and I'll give them that. They changed the flights, but actually for the head. And I mean, I guess if you don't need to make a new line of augers, if it's not broke, don't fix it, I guess. Yeah. But that's just one thing I have to say money-wise for them. On that too, another auger I'm sure we've all heard of, besides like your like Canadian Tire branded auger or whatever, is the Jiffy. Oh, I don't like that. The Jiffy Torch.
Yeah.
The Jiffy.
That's the electric one, right?
That's the electric one, the Torch.
I don't know. They did something there. They made great augers back in the day. We used to have the old Jiffy yellow head, and we also had a white head Jiffy. Those things started on minus 45 days, ran all day long, but they weighed like a truck. They were just super heavy, super aggressive, probably rip your arms off if you weren't careful. But yeah, we used to have those. We upgraded the Strike Master, and then everyone started upgrading, and then Jiffy's like, you know what, we're gonna do the same, and they just completely crap the bed on that. I don't know what happened.
I'm trying to think because I'm actually kind of having a bit of brain fire here because the torch is ringing a bell, but now I'm not sure if it's the electric one. Lightning and it's ringing a bell. I don't know why I'm blanking on this now, but the Jiffy electric is I'm not even sure they still make them, but they might discontinued. Was an 80 volt,
yeah,
which is like more than the G2, which was a 40, the Strike Master, which was a 40. I'm not sure what the E40 is. It's probably 40 volt. But 80 volt has so much potential, and I just think the problem was the way they made it was not. And I'm not trying to bash the company at all, but there was too much power for the amount of force. Like it was just too much power almost. It wasn't controlled power. It's very like I've used it before. Your arms hurt. It was just not as good. I think they went bankrupt. I think they might have been bought out by Eskimo, one of those brands. I can't remember exactly the top of my head, but we're getting off topic here. Augers, how much money you want to put into it? There's pros and cons to electric, gas. There's propane. Propane, I wouldn't recommend for Lake Winnipeg. If it gets too cold, propane will just not work. So let's just say that's out of the question for this discussion. But gas, I've had the Eskimo Z51 Shark, which is 51cc. That thing was an absolute powerhouse. I was like younger when I had this though, so I was like 9 or 10. So it was a little harder for me. A little bit harder for me to drill holes in that, especially when you're a smaller person or you're not as tall. It's a lot harder. And then with that too, if you have a heavier auger that you don't generally like to use, and it's a startup, then you're not going to want to drill as many holes, and that's going to hurt you in the long run if you're not drilling holes because you don't like your auger. So,
I mean, with the electric ones, even in minus 40, you're not pulling on the auger 5 or 6 times. Well, not even, probably like 10 or 15 times before it actually starts. It's push of a button and go. It's just as long as you keep those batteries warm and functional, then you're golden. And I've heard of Ion and Strike Master coming out with battery bags, like insulated battery bags to keep those warm. So that's probably one on your Christmas list too, for Strike Master and Ion and whatever, electric auger batteries, is to keep those warm, and you'll have a blast on there.
That's the biggest thing, keeping them warm. With gas, I mean, you'll have to prime it more if it's cold, but gas will generally go unless it's bad gas. Whereas if it's a battery, it has to be warm. Ion batteries are only actually waterproof to a certain extent. Like I've actually read the manual that they say it can get like a little bit of condensation, but it really can't get like much snow on it. Because I've actually had a battery go out on me, but I had absolutely amazing customer service. I got sent a battery. The warranty was super easy, but that's super important with the Ions. But actually, Strike Masters, I think I was reading. I could be wrong on this, but I think they're actually a lot more waterproof than the competitive Ion ones are. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Especially the material too that the Strike Masters were made out of. Feeling that and feeling yours is a little different.
It's definitely different material. I would probably give the upper hand to the Strike Master batteries, both the 40 and 24 volt. But yeah, I'd probably say so for quality.
I'm gonna go on a rant here, but this is your own personal preference. Handle wise, Ion, I don't know what they were doing, but I don't know. Their handles are just a little weird for me, and I can probably vouch for many people saying that too. But not bashing your auger or anything, but I've heard of people, actually breaking the handles off of the G2 auger from throwing it in their sled. Yeah, I know that might come to a surprise.
Well, that's just going to go back to the topic of making sure your sled's packed properly and equipment. Carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, so the handle's a little funky. I don't know if you've held one before, but I've heard of people breaking them. But what other companies? Strike Master, they have like a square. They have a bracket around the battery, which is really nice. So if you were to accidentally drop it, or if you were carrying something in the sled, it protects that battery all the way around 360. And the handles are a little, they're a little more orientated from an original auger, like a gas auger. They have the 2 handles that come up, and it's a square, right? But obviously times have changed.
The G2 going to the Alpha, there's a big difference actually, because that is a true point. Mine.
Oh yeah, that's right. In the Alpha it changed.
In the Alpha, it changed.
Yeah,
It's
right,
all the way around now, whereas the G2, it's not. You're sacrificing a little bit. It's a little lighter, but yeah, I guess technically if I drop it the wrong way, it's more prone to bake. But they also did put a battery guard on the new Alphas.
Yeah.
So they did fix it. That
was their kind of.
But
wall
Strikemaster had it.
Yeah.
They had it right way before Ion did, so I will give them that.
Yeah.
So.
But it's just with the Alpha, they've found out a way to make that bracket around the battery and flat handles. They've found a way to make that lighter than the 40 volt head, because the 40 volt head is pretty heavy considering now times where augers weigh 13 pounds. But yeah, I will give Strikemaster that they did make it right the first time, but times are changing for sure.
Sharp blades, very important. Now I have 2 sets of blades, one of which I just got for the season. This will be my first season using them. But my old pair, or my second pair actually, I didn't buy a new one because those were dull. I actually got them sharpened.
Yeah.
Now, companies don't want you obviously doing this, because with Ion blades it's about $80. Strikemasters is like $120. I'm not sure what the E40s will be, but it's a lot easier for them to make money when you're just buying new blades. When in reality, if you get the right person, I know a few people within the city who actually can properly sharpen them, and you save a lot of money with that. But sharp blades, very important. Depends the amount of holes you drill. If you are much of a run and gun person and you drill a lot of holes on Lake Winnipeg, as one most likely will, I would say maybe once a season, maybe 1.5 seasons, get those sharpened or changed or something like that. Sharp blades are absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and you run into a lot of stuff stuck in the ice as well. You get a lot of shacks on the ice that leave wood in the ice. It freezes over. You could be drilling on top of a 2x4, which is not ideal for auger blades. You can get rough ice too. It's a big lake. It does not all freeze perfectly. Over there it can be 2 feet. Over here it can be 4 feet, right?
Gray ice and black ice too.
Exactly. Yeah, you can get rough ice you can be drilling on top of a ridge and you have no idea, over top of ice just piled on top of each other. And yeah, it's really nice to have the proper tools to also change a blade on the ice on spot, instead of going all the way home, changing blades, coming all the way back out just because you don't have the right gear to fix it.
Yeah, it might not be an option for some people. You can't go home and get them changed. Make sure you have what you need in case. Worst case scenario should always be, to a certain extent, in the back of your head.
Yeah.
Just thinking what could go wrong. But yeah, sharp blades are very important. I would say if you can spend the money, blades are the most important part of the auger. Obviously, you can have a brand new auger or a new auger, but if it's super dull blades and you're leaning on it, you'll know when you need to change blades. You have to put a lot more weight into it.
Yeah.
Fresh out of the package, basically like butter with the new augers. If you're putting weight on them, like I've seen you do with your 4 seasonal blades,
yeah,
that's time to change. So,
yeah,
I have to carry this whole conversation. 5 rods, one of which, like you said before, will definitely have a jig in the middle. What are the other 4 rods going to have on them? Go.
4 rods, probably, like you said, one will be a jig in the minnow, obviously staple. One of them will have a rattle bait or an active jigging presentation bait to call in those fish, because like we said, Lake Winnipeg is very murky, and you really cannot see, or these fish cannot really see, past their nose. So you really want to get those vibrations in when you're ripping that rattle bait, size depending as well. Another one would probably be a spoon. Lots of people like to use Pelican spoons by Pelican Lures.
Gussie actually really likes his buckshots.
And buckshots too. Buckshots and the Pelican spoons as well do really well. Tips with a minnow, having that flashy approach, but also having that scent on it is really key too for that final approach. That takes 3 rods out. The other 2, probably another jig and a minnow, but a different style jig, or a different, it could be different color, or if it has like a thumper jig with a little flasher on it, a Google Eye jig, something, a little more flashy or something different from your other jig. And then my final rod, maybe Probably another rattle bait. Like I said, another different approach. If I'm using a TN60 or TN70, maybe I want a TN50 or like, a 2-inch rattle bait on there for something smaller. I'd probably start off with a bigger rattle bait and then downsize if these fish are negative. So like if I get a mark coming up from my big bait and whatever, and they're hitting it and I'm catching them, obviously I'm not going to change. But if, they come in and they kind of, piss off, then I'd rather change to a smaller bait than to a bigger bait because they're going to want to be, or they're going to be more picky, or, switch to a small buckshot with just a little minnow head, or that small, jig and a minnow that we've talked about a lot.
If I had to do the same thing, 5 rods, one of which will have a jig and a minnow. Now, I've been experimenting a lot with different brands and different styles of jigs. My favorite jigs come from Northland, personally. The Google jigs, I find they're way too prone to break. I don't like that. Like, it's not worth it if it's got rattle in it, but it's easy to break. There's no point. My favorite by Northland would have to be the DV jigs, the MVP jigs. You have the tungsten jigs, which they came out with. They are absolutely perfect. I'm going to be using them a lot more this season. But a lot of my favorite jigs come from Northland. And I will note, too, my favorite colors, since it being more Murky Lake, you want to use flashy colors. But I find pink and like an orange has always worked amazing in Lake Winnipeg. But pink especially, I can't stress the importance of pink. I don't know what it is, but pink is like, everyone I've talked to, everyone kind of knows that pink is the go-to jig color for Lake Winnipeg. So that's one rod. Obviously a rattle bait. It's basically like a deer call. It's bringing them in, so they're going to be coming in because of the rattles they're feeling. They can feel in their lateral line. They just get a sense of the disturbance in the water column. They'll come in. They'll generally take the jig and minnow, like we were mentioning before. So a rattle bait, I'm more of a smaller presentation kind of guy. It's just what I prefer. So there's the 2. Like you said, for the third one, a buckshot spoon. Like a spoon in general, I really like a buckshot though. There's a few different kinds now. There's for spoons, but I just like the buckshot personally. You can get the ones with the glow sticks. I just prefer a normal buckshot. More of the brown tan or of the orange. Something like that. My 4th will have a little bit of a different approach. I might have on one of 2 things. One of them could be a kamuki, which, if I had to explain it, is basically like a slanted rattle bait that's weighed down to. It's like a sand disturbance.
It's like a nose heavy rattle.
It's a nose heavy rattle bait, yeah.
With one hook.
Now,
one trouble. This
is actually a very controversial lure because Gord Pizer, for example, who is like the field editor for Hooked, or Outdoor Magazine, Gord Pizer, he loves them. Same with his nephew Liam. Whereas some people absolutely hate it and have not done very good on it. Personally, I've done in certain times of the year, like I'm gonna say the start of March Madness, I've done absolutely incredible on, like consistently for the years. So I've definitely maybe have a kamuki on there depending on the time of the season. So that's 4. And my last one, I have a few different lures that I would probably pick. It'd kind of be a toss up of what I'm doing. It might be either like a 16th ounce, like small presentation with like a flat, like a really small thumper jig, like a Northland thumper jig. Or it could be a different style rattle bait. It might just be even a big rattle bait. But I really don't expand off of, I expand off of 3 main things, which would be jigs, rattle baits, and spoons. Those are like the 3 lures that I use, but I experiment with a bunch of different variations of those 3. So those would be my top 5. Electronics.
That's a good one, yeah.
The elephant in the room, electronics. So definitely that the technology has gotten absolutely incredible. It's developing a lot faster. It's getting even better. It's a pay to win kind of thing though. You're spending a lot more money on the newer technology. Obviously, I'm talking about the live imaging. So the 3 main companies that do it, Humminbird, Mega Live, Lowrance Active Target, and what most people know is the Garmin Live Scope. Those are like the kings of the electronic game. I have the Humminbird Mega Live myself. I haven't used it for ice though. I'm very excited to do that. But even flashers, like your Helix 5s, your Markhams, your Vexilars, like electronics are super important. I wouldn't go out there without one personally.
For sure. And you can obviously, with the Mega Live and the live scope at the active targets, all those, you can really see fish behaviors as well, like the different orientations on, what bait they prefer and, how they're feeling those kind of days. But obviously, with, like a Helix 5 or just your plain old Hummingbird 55, 45, 35 kind of thing, you really cannot see. It's just kind of like a line going up and down. And I mean, honestly, if you want to be mobile, that's probably one of your best ways to go is your Hummingbirds, Helix 5s, or, the Markhams too. Those are really good, small, compact, and easy to use. But obviously, if you're going to hunker down a while and wait for those fish or, move maybe 2 or 3 spots a day, probably your Mega Life is going to be, working the best. But, it all suits for it. Well, sorry, you have a budget, right, on what you want to spend. So you can either go with Hummingbird, like with the flashers and everything, be small, compact, and have all those fun features, or you can spend that amount of money for the Mega Live, Active Target, and Live Scope, and all those ones for different features that it offers.
And it's kind of hard to pick the right one. Like, it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Some things work better than others. Some people might think you're crazy for spending that amount of money on a live imaging unit when they would rather spend on an auger, which is to each their own, everyone's opinion. The biggest problem, I think, is that there's really no in between with Lake Winnipeg. It's either nice out or it's just completely awful. Now, when you're in a tent for 8 hours a day, it's so much nicer, especially with 3 people, just to have
One screen
with the live imaging and download, seeing them all, seeing the fish cruise in. You can see the way they're positioned because you can actually see where the tail is and the head is. That's super nice, but you're really restricted. So if it were to get nice when you're hole hopping, you can use the forward mode, see where they are, but it's so hard to hole hop. It's a 2-hand job. Whereas with a nice little compact, like soft carrying case, whether it be like a Helix 5, or like you're saying, the Ice series, Hummingbirds or Vexars or Markhams, it's just get her in the water and right away go ahead and see what's down there. If there's nothing there, take your little 10, 15 pound unit. It depends on the battery you have. That's where most weight comes from. And go to another hole. But if you're stuck inside all day, you don't necessarily find it as enjoyable to stare at a flasher or a 2D line for 8 hours a day. So it's definitely kind of harder to compare those. Most people will have a flasher, not as expensive, not everyone can afford a $4,000 unit, but there's definitely a time and place.
It's like a video game for sure.
It's
like video game playing on the ice.
Really. Yep. I'm excited. I've used it so much in the open water season, but I have not used it open ice fishing, so I'm super excited. That'll be a whole different ball game.
You used it once ice fishing last year for crappies.
Crappies, sorry. Not for walleyes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. And I guess, we went to the Red River, Saugers, but I'm talking like a Lake Winnipeg, like walleye expedition.
14 feet of water, camping out for most of the day, and seeing what's happening. Because like half the time on the east side there, we get lulls during the day. We get up there at 7 o'clock, and we're not catching anything till 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden we have like 3 or 4 fish on our lines, and then nothing, and then we get another 3 or 4. So it'd be really neat to see what they come in by. If they come in by 5s, 10s of fish, like of just schools swimming by, right? So it'll be, and we can get a heads up on when they're coming in, right? Not, I'm marking one and it's right below me, and then you lose your chance, right? You get at least a 5-second, 10-second warning before they're actually coming in, which is nice, and that'll be really interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. And just going again to the point of this little talk here, being in the right place at the right time, some of it has to do with luck, but the famous Bill Dent saying, and I feel so bad for not knowing exactly how it says, but he basically talks about fishing is 10% luck, 20% skill, and like 70% having the right equipment. Something like that, along those lines.
Yeah.
But he's stressing the importance of equipment. It's basically like having a bag of luck. Each time, okay, that's a terrible analogy, but equipment makes it easier. Yeah. Making it easy for yourself. It just, the stars will align at some point if everything's going right. I tried. I don't know.
The importance of having Having the right gear at the right time is better than having the wrong gear at the right time. You know what I mean?
Wait, what?
Having the right gear at the right time is key, especially if you want to target,
Having
big
the
lake
right
work.
gear at the right time. Didn't I think of that?
Sorry, okay, we're done here.
I thought you had to have the wrong gear at the wrong time, dadgummit. Okay, sorry. Continue. Sorry, you were saying.
Cut.
You were saying.
Back to you.
Okay. Cut. Equipment, importance of that. I just completely violated Bill Dance. I'm so sorry. You're my hero. Anyway, we talked about line, talked about rods, kind of. My ideal. What are you
I'm sorry.
smiling at? Show some.
Just violated Bill Dance.
I'm
man.
so sorry.
God damn.
I don't even deserve to be. Did you just swear? Okay, this is really turning south. We're gonna wrap this up pretty soon here. We have one more thing to talk about, and that is.
I don't know. It's your idea.
Man, we're supposed to be thinking like
Shit,
insane.
went over this before.
And
Throw me right in the deep end here. Unless this rings a bell when you say it.
No,
What is it?
I don't know. Okay, we're getting a little bit off topic here. Last and final thing we have to talk about, which is the unwritten rule, which is at the end of the day, what's going to dictate how your success is going to be, is who you are as an angler. And what I mean by that is how willing are you to put in the hours to get on the ice, to get everything ready, be organized, have a goal in mind, realize how you're going to get to that. If you want to catch 3-inch walleye, you need to at least have an idea of what your plan is and be able to execute at some point how you want it to go. If you have a plan and you have a little bit of an idea, it's a lot better than going out there completely blind and not knowing what to do. So going a little bit off of a basis idea in the back of your mind of how you're going to do. Are you willing to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go and spend 6 hours in a cold tent to potentially catch the fish of a lifetime? Or are you just going to go out, maybe go out every once in a while if people are going out with a pail and maybe a few rods here and you don't really care, but you really want to catch that fish? At the end of the day, it's who you are as an angler, and that's going to really dictate how you're going to do. You can have all the gear and all that in the world, but if you really aren't willing to put in the work, it will not be done. So that's something to keep in mind.
Exactly. See, you did not tell me that before, so you couldn't have said it any better.
With that, guys, that is the wrap-up of the first episode of the Lines Out of Water podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. I certainly did. Definitely covered a few points here. The ice season is coming up very soon. We will definitely be hitting the water. Nathan Blank, Parisian Outdoors. Lines Out of the Water podcast, all one big circle. We will see you guys out in the next video very soon. Peace out.